Hopefully the lighting works. Wait for a few people. Good evening, good evening. Hopefully the lighting works. Oh, I guess I can put my other light on. Let me know if it's too dark. But if not, I can keep going. Hello everyone, hello everyone. I am a little bit... Okay. So I'm going to begin just so that I'm just mindful of time and everything else. So tonight I'm going to be talking about triggers and grief. And so please feel free to write in things as they come up in the comment section, and definitely share it with other people as well. December I'm going to do another Facebook Live, and then starting in January it'll be on the YouTube channel. So I just wanted to go back into the definition of grief. And so grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of a familiar pattern or a change in that familiar pattern. So basically that's like when you want to call your grandmother, because usually when stress happens, she's the person you call, and then you try to call her and then you realize that she, has transitioned, that she's no longer here. So it's that moment when your behavior has been interrupted and then you have an emotional reaction because of it. So keeping in that working definition of grief, I wanted to talk today about grief triggers, because we are in a season right now where there are a lot of triggers because of the holidays, right? So Thanksgiving is coming up, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, birthdays, anniversaries, like all those things are coming up, and sometimes they can cause us to have grief triggers. I know for me, I just recently went to a funeral on Thursday, and that created some triggers in me. I have 3 more announcements of loved ones and people that I know about whose services I have to attend this week and in the upcoming week. So definitely grief triggers can happen, and they happen to all of us, but it's identifying when they occur and then what we do and what we can do within that process of grief triggers. So grief triggers are anything that brings an emotion or a memory related to your loss. Grief triggers are anything that brings up memories or emotions of your loss. And it can be anticipated situations. So we're coming upon the holidays. So it could be that going to Thanksgiving and the person who used to sit at a certain table is no longer there, and then that can now cause a grief trigger. It could be a surprise trigger. You're walking down the street and you see your loved one, an image of someone that looks like your loved one, and that can spark a grief trigger. So it can be those anticipated moments or those quote-unquote surprise moments that bring about the memory or bring about the emotion of the loss. And one thing that I said before is there's this misconception that time heals all wounds. And that, as I said before, is not truth. But what can happen is when you begin to take action with time can put you on a journey of healing. And it's not that time heals the wounds, it's what actions are you taking with time to heal. And so that's why it's good to go to therapy. That's why it's good to go to support groups, because you need to do the action steps with your time to get on a healing process. And the same thing with even like our human body, right? Like, you can break an elbow and it's not like, oh, just let time, heal that elbow. No, you need to bandage it. You need to go through physical therapy. Like, you have to do things in order to go to the process of healing. And the same thing goes with our heart. We have to make sure that when we go through heartache, when we go through upsets, that we're actually doing the proper things to heal our heart with time, so that we can be on this journey of healing. And so as we talk continually about triggers, there are things that we do short term that can suppress our feelings. And they're sometimes called short term energy or short-term energy relieving behaviors. So it's any behavior that we engage in that indirectly relates to that particular thing, right? Real wordy. So here we go. So basically what the short-term energy is when you're suppressing your emotions with other things. So what are those other things? Instead of feeling the upset, instead of feeling the heartache, you overwork yourself. You exercise rigorously. You overeat or you undereat. So sometimes people will do what's that emotional eating and just will consume everything and then realizing that they were just emotionally eating. Or they undereat, where they remove meals from their daily activities. It could be an increase in drug or alcohol use. It can be fantasy escape. And so fantasy escape is like detaching from your reality to now, deal with that. So that's like those guilty pleasure TV shows, the movies, the internet. It's watching something that can suppress your emotions that you're feeling. Gambling. I talked about exercise, sex, isolation, anger. So it's those things that we do that keep pressing down those emotions. And usually as a result of doing those other things, it results to other things. So instead of us dealing with the heartache and we emotionally eat, it can lead to high blood pressure. It could lead to anxiety. It can lead to headaches. It can lead to disease and sickness. And so we want to make sure that we're not looping the pain over and over, but we're actually healing the pain. And that is what we need to be mindful of as we go into the season. And there's always a season of grief and loss, whether we are experiencing grief and loss or whether other people are experiencing grief and loss. And so one of the questions that I want to ask to everyone is like, what are the things that you do that oftentimes suppress your heartache, that suppresses your upset, that pushes it down and creates this lid and pacifies? That's basically what it's doing. You're really pacifying your true feelings in order to have this kind of other outcome. And so if there's anyone who wants to kind of chime in the things that you do, some of the things that I listed, or if you can think of other things that people do that when there is a trigger present, then they use those short-term energy behaviors to suppress their emotions. Just waiting for some more people to respond. And as I'm responding, just saying hello to some people who are here. Yvette and Sheila, Omar, Nora, Naila, Tasha, Rob, Margaret's coming in. So just thinking, like I said, thinking about what are either the triggers that have come up for you as you're going through this, whether the triggers that you have noticed have come up, or what are some of the short-term energy behaviors that you're doing to suppress it. So as more things come in, I'll share that, like I said before, I attended a funeral last Thursday, and I was emotionally triggered. It was an ex-co-worker, and the daughter they were about to close the casket, and then the daughter just, had an emotional reaction, and it triggered emotion from me. And because I remember like being in that situation, being in that place where when we were closing the casket for my brother, and I had an emotional trigger. And at the time, I don't remember what I did to actually, as a behavior, to relieve it. I guess I isolated myself. I'll say that I didn't share. I wasn't sitting next to anybody. That was the other thing. So people were either in front of me or people were behind me, but there was no one on my row. And I didn't, share at that moment what was I going in, which was not a good thing. That was not a good thing. And that just shows, too, that, we're still on this whole process of healing through it. And one thing that I wanted to say, too, in terms of triggers and in terms of how to deal with that trigger, oftentimes, too, we try to put on the face of everything's okay. And it's okay that it's not okay, but part of that, instead of putting on like that happy face that everything is okay, one of the things I like to say is put on an honest face. And I say this when I do my groups, that when I do my groups, I say this is not just a safe space, but this is a brave space. Because oftentimes when you say a safe space, people want to say, okay, it's safe, so I don't have to go outside my limits, right? I can kind of feel safe in this place. But saying that it's a brave space will oftentimes push people to do something different. Like go to that line that you don't want to cross emotionally, because it is a brave space for you to have whatever reaction you need to have. And I think the same thing goes into when we go into the holidays and anniversaries and reminders. Instead of putting on that happy face, put on that honest face of let the tears flow, let the reminders set in, let the memories set in, because oftentimes that helps us on that healing process. It's actually doing something to put us on that journey of healing. And so there are some things that people have said in terms of triggers and on what they do to relieve them. So Rob said the holidays are a trigger for me, and I've been getting a lot of headaches. I find myself getting angry. And Omar said suppressing your emotions, dealt with suppressing my emotions when I didn't want to deal with things. How do we take care of not suppressing our emotions? Good stuff. So I'll go backwards with Omar and go into Robert. Rob, one of the things that we can do to not suppress our emotions is to actually address them, and it is to tell the truth. So finding someone you trust, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a friend, whether that's a coworker, but whoever you trust, go to them and tell them how you're feeling. And in that trust, just understand that trust may not always be just a shoulder, a listening ear. It may also be a different perspective that you didn't see on the situation. So it could be, well, the memories come up and you go to someone and say, you know what, I just want to share with you that I'm feeling some feelings right now. And then you share with them and they say, well, good thing, but there's another alternative to another situation. Like they can see it in another way that probably you didn't see it because you're in your emotions. So what you can do instead of suppressing your emotions is to tell someone about your emotions and process it with them. Whether that gets you angry again or whether that gives you silence, whatever it is, like don't suppress the emotion, face the emotion. And Rob was saying that he gets headaches, and then he oftentimes gets angry. And all of that is natural. That feeling of being angry for whatever the loss, whether it was anger at things that you did or didn't do, or anger whether they did something or didn't do things, regardless, the emotion of anger. And so instead of suppressing it, finding ways to talk about it, to deal with it. The other thing is in that being, having an honest face, in that way of telling the truth is, I say this all the time, and I don't say this to plug it, but you definitely need some type of counseling, therapy, support group, because like I said, time does not heal all wounds, but action with time puts you on the journey of healing. And so just to be mindful of, you don't want that headache to turn into progressive migraines, right? And so you don't want your body now to have an adverse effect because you weren't dealing with the emotional aspects. And that sometimes can be the balance that we often have to find in this whole grief process. Omar says he's going to use an example from my class next week. Good, thank you. This is all the sharing platform. And so if there's some things that you want to share, and I think this is good for not just the griever, but also those who are supporting individuals who are grieving, because I think that's important too. That, and I say this all the time, is that, you know, in life we are taught to accumulate things, but we're never taught how to deal with the loss of things. And I think culturally and just spiritually, like, we're not really taught of what to do when we lose things. And it kind of brings me up to even like as with kids, because I know people who are dealing with, you know, death of a loved one, and then there's kids involved, whether it's birth kids, grandkids, great grandkids. And so we try to like shield kids from loss instead of helping them process through loss. And so it could be, like I said, what are those things that you use to pacify that hurt, that cry? So as a kid to an adult, it's like, okay, well, you're crying, let me give you a cookie. Let me take you to McDonald's, you know, let's get your favorite pizza. And so that's putting in place the use of food to suppress the emotions. And then that can keep a long-term effect in adulthood on how people address their hurt, how they address their loss, is by supplementing it with food versus being able to honestly say what it is you're feeling. And kids grieve too. And I want to put that out there. In these triggers, as much as we as adults have things that come up that emotionally trigger us, that trigger us in grief, kids also need a space to process their grief because they hurt. And so it's not just, yeah, your dad died, but their grandfather died and they had a relationship and they need to process that and understand what that's like. Make sure I didn't miss any questions on here. Okay, so then I didn't miss any questions. Okay, so lastly, just wrapping up, just want to go a brief synopsis again of just everything that discussed. So grief triggers. Triggers are anything that bring up emotions or memories related to your loss. So grief triggers are anything that bring up emotions or memory to your loss. And sometimes those triggers can be anticipated, like the holidays that's coming up, anniversaries, birthdays, death dates. All of those can be anticipated triggers. And then there are those surprise triggers, like maybe seeing a clothing item or item, a personal belonging of that individual can cause a grief trigger. It could be going to other funerals can cause a grief trigger. It could be seeing the resemblance of that person. That can be a grief trigger. And so we talked about that time doesn't heal all wounds, that with action and with time can create you, put you on a journey of healing. And so in that, I say the example of even like a broken leg. You know, you just don't let the broken leg just do whatever. You go and get medical attention and you do the steps, whether that's physical therapy, whether that's medication. It's actually doing things with time to get you on that journey. And then we talked about what are those things that we pacify. What are those things that we do that bury the emotional hurt that we often feel? And we call them short-term energy relieving behaviors. And so some of those things are overeating or undereating. It could be exercise, increase in sexual activity. It can be drug and alcohol use. It could be overworking. It can be anger. It can be shopping, retail therapy. So instead of feeling the feeling of hurt, going out and buying something. It could be gambling. It can be fantasy outlets, whether those guilty pleasures on TV, whether it's going to the movies, the internet, whatever things you want to do to kind of block out whatever feelings you're feeling. So watch that. Those are those behaviors that we do. And when we pile up those things, overworking, gambling, sex, shopping, it creates another effect within us, which can be high blood pressure, headaches, sickness, disease. All of those things can then internally affect us now. So not only are we dealing with the heartache, now we're dealing with other physical elements as well. And so the question that I asked to everyone again was, what are some of the things that you do that you engage in to pacify some of those feelings? What are the things that you suppress in order not to have feelings? And to challenge everyone in those moments when you have those grief triggers, to move from putting on a happy face to putting on an honest face. When can you insert the honesty of I'm feeling hurt? When can you insert the honesty of, I just need a hug? When can you insert the memory of that person, whether it brings you sadness or whether it brings you happiness, just to be honest with you and the people around you on what it is you're feeling. And then in that, instead of putting on a happy face, putting on an honest face, is telling the truth. Telling the truth to others so that others can support you. And also in that is whether it's counseling, therapy, support groups, a trusted friend, trusted co-worker, a family member, so that you can be on the path of healing. So that was just today's topic on triggers and grief. If there's any lasting comments, once again, this will be posted up for you to share, for you to ask questions. I will put up also the next support group that will be available. And there might be another Facebook Live next week. I think next week, if time is available, then I'll do one on just the process of like what people do, like the myths that come in with grief. Like, for instance, I don't teach on the 5 stages of grief, and I can tell you guys why on the next week. But they're just some things that we can talk about in terms of myths with grief that I can do next week. So if there's any other questions on triggers, on what to do to process triggers, please type them in now as we wrap up. Yes, Rob said that November in general is just a trigger. And I will say that it was once told to me that between October and March is when a lot of grief happens. And so a lot of, more importantly, like death happens. And so the individual said between October and March is when God often calls back his children, God's children. And this season, with death and dying, and then with holidays, it can definitely increase more triggers. So I can understand why November, December, January, all of that can definitely be incoming triggers for everyone. So any other lasting thoughts on anything? Okay. So I just wanted to say thank you for the Facebook Live. I look forward to working with everyone, and I hope these things are useful so that we as a community can move into healing through our grief and our loss. And it's not just with loved ones. It can be in finances. It could be with pets. It's a whole list of things. And so I'll share that with you guys. So I'll also share the 40 different life experiences that we go through that often bring about with grief and loss. And so I'll share that with you guys next week as well, so that you guys can keep an eye out and kind of even backtrack of where in past experiences in your life you've experienced loss and you didn't even realize that you were actually grieving through that process. So thank you, everyone. Hi, Dr. Hardy. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. If you missed any portions, please start over from the beginning and please share with other people. Have a wonderful night, wonderful day, and I look forward to speaking and talking with everyone next time.